Well, happy Tuesday morning to you. It's supposed to be a warm day today. They're predicting 51. We'll see what actually happens. I do these videos in advance, just so that I have time to do some research, and might take me more time to do research than I figure, so I want to take some of the pressure off, and so I do a few of them in advance, and I schedule them so that they'll be released at 5:30 in the morning. Right now, let me think. It's about 7 a.m. on Sunday morning, but I'm doing the video as if it's Tuesday morning, so happy Tuesday, I found an article on NewsCenterMaine.com, and I thought it was precious. I just think it's just a precious thing. And the title of it is, Maine woman who has been knitting for more than 100 years turns 105. Just ain't that something? Dottie Brown of Lewiston, Maine, learned to knit when she was just 4 years old. On March 16th, Dottie turned 105 years old. Can you imagine that? The author is Beth McAvoy. I can't pronounce the names anymore, I tell you. When people get in my Uber car and they have an odd name, I tell them I make an attempt at the name, and I said, now how do you pronounce it? Was I anywhere near close? They'll laugh, They'll tell me how to pronounce it, and I'll repeat it, and I say, it's your name. I think I ought to pronounce it the way you like, and they smile, and we get along good that way. So, up in Lewiston, Maine, Dottie Brown of Lewiston, Maine, who learned how to knit when she was just 4 years old, and is still knitting today, turned 105 this week. The knitting group that congregates in her living room every Thursday, and has for several years, was planning on throwing her a birthday party. But like most gatherings, it has been canceled as Dottie and her friends try to practice social distancing. Ain't that a shame? I have to do that social distancing thing because of the coronavirus that's going around. And older people, and I'm one of them. I'm an older person that's subject to, the coronavirus. And I'd love to live to be 105, I'll tell you, I really would, so I'm practicing social distancing today. My church is going to have a online Facebook live streaming service today. That'll be interesting. The first time we've ever done anything like that, and that's what we're going to do. The woman who wrote the article says, I met Dottie back in January when she welcomed me into her home. I had the privilege of not only meeting her, but her knitting group friends as well. They call their group Sit and Knit. It kind of rhymes, and it has a nice ring to it. The Sit and Knit gals follow rules that Dottie set up years ago. No gossip, no church talk, and they pray before their refreshments at the end of the night. Now, that's kind of sweet, isn't it, that they pray before refreshments? There's kind of a rule of us Nazarenes that if it's just coffee and donuts, we don't pray over coffee and donuts. We pray only if it's food staples. We don't pray over pizza. It's just kind of those funny traditions that we do. When I talked to Dottie in January, she goes on to say, there was so much I could not include in my first story. Today, in honor of her 105th birthday, we look back on some of her charming and funny stories. Dottie was born in the small village of Upper Northfield in Nova Scotia. She lived in her grandparents' home, lit with kerosene lamps with her parents and her father's brothers. Dottie was an only child who says her only friend was a lamb her father gave her the responsibility of caring for when she was just 5 years old. Now ain't that sweet? One little lamb taking care of another. It's just too sweet for words. Dottie's grandfather was a cobbler and would make her shoes. Unfortunately, they were, quote, hideous. Now, the article doesn't say if it was Dottie's friends' opinions or Dottie's own opinions about their shoes being hideous. My guess is that it was the general opinion of all the girls involved. Girls know a thing or two about styles, and men only seem to be interested in functionality. It's one of our biggest faults. I'm just inserting my own opinion here. And you ladies have to cure us of this genetic defect. But I'm warning you, it takes years and years. Years of mental torture for both you and your husband or boyfriend. Just saying. But you can free to work on it. I'm 67 years old and I've learned a thing or two. My wife's very style conscious, and she's teaching me things even at the ripe old age of 67. So going on with the article. Dottie would walk down the lane in her ugly shoes and slip them off when her house was out of view. She preferred going to school in her bare feet rather than wearing her horrible shoes. Her grandfather found out and she went to the woodshed, which is why, with a giggle, she advises her parents, spare the rod, spoil the child. I think I did a video about that very same subject a while ago. In 1935, Dottie married Maine George Brown, to whom she'd been introduced by her parents. Quote, this is Dottie speaking, he was a hick. Oh, a hillbilly hick he was. But he got better, Dottie says through laughter. Now here, I just got to introduce you to a story. Everything reminds me of a story, and I need a cup of Maine coffee. I don't have my Maine mug this morning. I've got my plain mug. It's just, there's no writing on it and nothing, just plain red. But it's got good Maine coffee, Got to wet my whistle. My theory about this is what I'm inserting, my commentary on this article is this. I wonder if Dottie had anything to do with the de-hickifying of George. I'll just bet that she was a bit like sandpaper, polishing off those rough edges of his year after year until he became somewhat more refined. And the story it reminds me of is of a Maine farming couple whose daughter had come home on spring break from college. She was down in the Boston area, and she'd been a sophomore and she'd gotten some kind of refinement, down with Boston College. And she was sitting on the porch with her parents one fine Monday morning when her father suddenly stood up and announced, well, it's been fine chatting with you, darling, but I've got to get to work. Today's the day I've got to get out spreading cow crap on the back 10 back acres before I can plant the potato crop. Well, the daughter, now having spent 2 years at a sophisticated Boston college, was somewhat embarrassed by her father's language. You can imagine. She turned to her mother and said, Mom, Dad seems so crude. Can't you get him to say something a bit more polite, like manure, or better yet, fertilizer? He sounds like such a hick when he says crap. The mother just smiled and said, darling, it's all relative, You got to take things a step at a time. It's taken me 10 years just to get him to say crap. I guess you have to settle on some compromises here and there to make a good marriage. Okay, back to the story. The couple had 2 sons, and they stayed married for 1 month shy of 60 years when their father George passed away. George had wanted to move to the Lewiston home where Dottie still lives, but she initially refused because there was no toilet, only a privy. That means outhouse to you non-Mainers. I said to my husband, I will not go there until there is a bathroom. And he said, there's no place to put one. And I said, you go there by yourself. Well, he found one. Dottie's been living there for the last 2 decades on her own in her Lewiston home with a bathroom, in large part because of her kind help from her family, neighbors, and the women of the Sit and Knit Club. Her fellow knitters pick her up for church. They take her trash to their home so she doesn't have to bring trash cans to the curb. And they call her, quote, all the time. So she's got plenty of socialization. Dottie says her neighbors and other friends take her to the grocery shop and they help her balance her checkbook and they help her out around the house. The only complaint that the knitters have of Dottie is that she can be stubborn. And I inserted my own opinion. Imagine a 105-year-old woman being called stubborn or set in her ways. Don't you know that it's probably her habits that are the only thing, being set in your ways and having habits. It's the only thing that's keeping her alive this long. Give the poor old gal a break. Back to the story. Recently, she got stuck in her sink when the 4-foot 11-inch tall great-great-grandmother climbed the stepladder to clean her curtains. She couldn't find the stepladder when she was coming down. Honestly, she sounds just like my mother. My mother did stuff like that, really. She was trying to clean something up, and they had a cathedral roof in their living room, and she climbed the stepladder, and she fell off, and she it's a good thing she didn't crack a skull or break a hip or something. She told us about it, but she was pretty bruised for a while. She says, I was in there for quite a while, she said, matter of factly. Somebody probably came and checked on her and said, what on earth are you doing in that sink? But she couldn't find the stepladder to get back down. Fellow knitter Rachel now washes Dottie's curtains, so she won't be doing that anymore. Among the laughter and busy fingers that sit and knit, one might never know that the group is organized with a set of rules. Quote, there will be no gossip. We won't talk church things, because church things does tend to morph into gossip. And we will have prayer at the table when we have our refreshments. That's a good thing. And if they want to come under those conditions, that's fine. And it's worked out beautifully, says Dottie. And the women just don't knit together. When Dottie was 100 years old, a few of them snowshoed across Porter Lake in New Vineyard. Every year, Dottie is in the Moxie Parade in Lewiston, and she used to ride a tandem bike with the pastor, but for the last 2 years, she's given up bike riding. Really, she was bike riding at 102 years on a tandem bike. And listen, I inserted this. I suspect it is because she suspected that her pastor wasn't doing his share of the peddling, and she wasn't about to let someone else take a free ride. She says, I have a lovely bike in the barn, but I have been declared I'll be beheaded if I ever take it out. 105 years old, she still wants to go bike riding. What a woman. Dottie said, and she cast the blame on her son for taking her bike away. She's got spunk, I'll tell you. Some of the women in Sit and Knit drive an hour to spend time in Dottie's warm living room every week, but they say she is worth it. Quote, she is just truly an amazing person, said fellow knitter Sandy Wood. I just pray that she has many more years to enjoy. And this is a quote by Dottie of her friends. She says, I am well blessed. Well, I hope this article does give you a blessing of a woman who's got so much energy and so much spunk at 105 years old. I'm telling you. I want to live to be 150 or die trying. I hope I make it at least to 105 like Dottie did and still have the spunk to want to ride my bike, even though my son won't let me. Well, God bless you. You have a wonderful day, and I hope you enjoyed the story, because it's a real Maine story. It really is.